Loving and nurturing God, today we remember mothers of all kinds, nurturers of all kinds, and those who've been part of our life story, modeling the life of Jesus and his love for us. So we just ask that the written word lead us to what we hear in the spoken word and bring our hearts together to live together in your living word. Amen. So when I was a little girl, we grew up going to United Church, which I know not everyone did, but I do remember one specific sermon when my minister at the time, whose name was Gord Roberts, and he was a really special guy. And he was trying to preach a sermon the year that he found out his mother would not be living until the next Mother's Day. And so it was a very emotional time, and interesting for me to see a male person being that emotional and vulnerable in a time when that was not common, and in a community where I was surrounded by strong and stoic farm types who didn't tend to show a lot of feeling. And I took that to heart about the words he spoke and what he felt about his mother. But the main line, and he would laugh if I told him this now, but the main line that I remember is that he talked about, how do you know who the mom is? And he said, the mom is the one who's willing to clean the gunk out of the sink. And if that doesn't speak about some kind of sacrifice, I'm not sure what does. Because there's always some kind of gunk in life, and a lot of the times the moms end up helping out with those jobs. So I know in the world and in the commercial world there are lots of stereotypes and ideas about moms and what today is supposed to mean if it's a truly Hallmark holiday. But I also know it's a complicated holiday because not everybody has a relationship with their mother. Not everyone has had a smooth one. Many today will miss their mom, and many too will wish they'd had the chance they dreamed of to be a mom. Or maybe people out there are also struggling with the many tasks right now, living through a pandemic and trying to juggle all the tasks and realities of being a mother or an other. So the next slide speaks to our scripture today with the message that Jesus was trying to impart to his followers in a very frantic time. He was busy trying to sum up his lifetime of work. He had a strong sense that he didn't have much time left, and he had to sort out a way to have his followers listen, and what would be that one nugget he would try to share that they would actually take on from his life, and that example they would live on without him. There was so much he was trying to say in that time with the foot washing and knowing that he would be abandoned soon and knowing he would be betrayed by those he loved him. But at the heart of it, the main message he wanted to get across was just love. Love each other. So what did he want with that? He didn't want us just to be nice or just to say the right thing or be kind or thoughtful. Because real love, the real love Jesus was talking about, the kind that he expressed from his loving God, also involved something of sacrifice, which does not mean emptying ourselves out at every turn to serve the world until we're empty. We need to leave some of that energy and love for ourselves too. But something about this has to do with loving others as they need to be loved, just not how we think they should be loved. And part of that means having empathy and noticing what matters to others, and many times giving up some of our comforts and getting out of our own comfort zone just to show that kind of love that's needed. So today in our context, we consider the relationships with those mothers and others in our lives who teach us so much about love and sacrifice, and in their own way show how to build us up. Our next slide has a notepad image on it, and when I was thinking about those simple tasks of motherhood, this is an image that came to mind because I took the subway a lot when I was doing my commuting back and forth to do my studies in ministry. And I usually carried a backpack because it was easier on my back, and it was usually in my kid's backpack, so it had all kinds of bits in it that weren't usually mine. And there was a dad near me on the subway, and he had a little person with him, and the little person was squirming and talking and flopping and making noise, and he was getting so embarrassed because his kid wasn't behaving and sitting still on the subway, and he'd say, listen up and sit down and don't do that, and oh, look out the window, and you could tell he just didn't know what else to do. And so I did a little dig in my bag, and I found some scraps of paper, and I found some old pencil crayons. And I summoned up a little memory from church pew days and doctor's office days that my mom did, that I'm sure her mom did, and I'm sure many other moms around the world have done this trick. It's the distraction technique of doodling whatever you think of on a piece of paper until the child is distracted enough to focus on that. And it was just a warm little moment we shared because I asked him permission and he was fine with me helping, and I just drew something and got her attention, and all of a sudden she calmed down and she asked if she could draw, so I passed along my supplies. We had lots of that kind of thing anyway, and they were able to transition into a different time on that train ride, and the dad could calm down too. And it was such a neat feeling of passing on this nurturing technique that other people can share. And so with that image, I honor the generations of nurturing that mothers do and the kinds of ways that we pass on our tricks and our tips through the generations. And the next image I thought of was swimming, which is not warm enough today for a swim, but it comes to mind anyway when I think about my mom, because it's interesting that I took for granted that we had swimming classes when we were kids, and we were taken camping to go swimming, and we were taken to my grandparents to go swimming, but it wasn't natural for my mom or for my grandma. Both of them had very scary times as kids to do with water, and also times when people didn't have extra money, or even the notion of swimming lessons was not really available. And both of them found ways to put aside their fears about water. My grandma had the pool, so we got to enjoy that time with her, but my mom made sure she was the head organizer of everything, so she was the one that made sure all four of us had lessons. And even the classes we failed, we took again to make sure we at least had the basics, so that even if she wasn't always comfortable in the water, that we would be. And I think about the kind of fear that people feel when they're trying to teach their kids or their young people something that they knew they couldn't master and they didn't have a chance to try. And so with that, we honor the mothers who've come up with ways to get beyond their fears, to pass on bravery to the next generation. And another sort of summertime sacrifice that I thought of was the amount of time she would put into the events we had. So when we were young, we had hundreds of dairy cows, and my dad was, with dairy cows, you get them checked to see if they're, as they're purebred, to see if they're a high-ranking cow or a middle-ranking cow or a lower-ranking cow. And if you're a really serious breeder of animals, you'd like to know that they're doing well and they're getting marked with a high grade. And the summer we got an excellent cow was my dad's favorite moment. And he was so excited to celebrate his first excellent cow, which if you're from a dairy farm, you know that's a big deal. If you're not, it sounds a little strange, but we had an excellent cow. And my mom had 4 kids running around the farm. And you give up a lot when you're married to a farmer. And despite all of it, she managed to put on this huge party, which was my dad's idea, but she, let's face it, probably put a lot of it on. And not only did she put it on, she made double high companies coming icing for all of the cakes. And to me, that was the ultimate in a mom sacrifice, putting all that butter into this gorgeous icing that we weren't even going to keep all to ourselves. So anyway, we celebrate the mothers who find ways to hold it all together while they're also hosting and toasting and making all the double high icing to make those parties happen. And the next image is one that I wish I could have dug up the dorky high school picture I have. It's somewhere on file, but it's a bit hard to find these old pictures. So in high school, my sister and I were we still are, very patriotic, lovers of Canada, lovers of our country and the freedom we have here to be ourselves and the diversity that our country has. And so in the 90s, it was time for a referendum, and there was this talk of Quebec trying to separate. And we were, I don't know, probably 15 and 17, and we thought this was a terrible idea, and we had to take a stand. And my mom, who's more of a local volunteer, not super political, somehow got convinced to fill up our minivan with teenage girls and Canada flags and Canada makeup. And she drove us from Ottawa, which she didn't enjoy, across the bridge to Hull, which was the Quebec side, which she enjoyed even less. And she let us parade around at this pro-Save Canada, Stay Unified protest. And I have to think, if anyone was outside of her comfort zone at that moment, it was her. But she got the pictures and she drove the car, and somehow she stayed up late in the dark watching us do our thing. And lo and behold, Canada is still as one right now, so maybe we had some small part in that. So I think of that time and honor all the mothers and others who've seen the spark of what lights up a kid's eyes and helps them stand up for what they believe in, even if it means driving to Hull and back. You like that? Jim liked that one. And I've got a story here about a mom standing up for others, depending on their abilities, and it's a little story that Heather shared, and it really caught my attention too, because it kind of followed that whole theme of giving up some of your own comfort for somebody else. So her parents loved to eat out, and they loved their pizza nights. And so one night, Heather's mom went out to the local pizza chain to get her order, and she would typically wait in a chair, and they would give it to her, and all would be well. But she was recovering from hip surgery, and the store had decided at their head office to take away all the furniture, to make it all stripped down and clean and very simple, and a whole new look to modernize, which did not work out very well for someone who had mobility issues and was recovering from hip surgery. And she was none too pleased about this activity that had happened without her notice or her permission. So the next day, she was so upset about this lack of consideration that she worked her way through the phone calls until she found the CEO of that pizza company. And she said, "How would you feel if your mother went to buy pizza and she had nowhere to sit while she was waiting? How would that work for you?" And guess what? That 20-minute wait of her not having a chair was enough to motivate her to make that change. And that pizza chain changed back their policy and made sure they had chairs again for their customers. So I think that is a pretty neat little example of the kind of sacrifices that people in our lives are giving. So she describes her mom as strong-willed and determined, resilient and passionate, confident and fierce and caring. And so we honor the mothers and others like Hurricane Hazel, and knowing that her experience would affect others too. And so she sacrificed her time and her effort and her comfort to make sure others could be more comfortable. And the next slide shows more about the others category. And this one I think is so important in how we envision how we can raise each other up in a community of love. Because you, over these months that I've been with this community, have told me about the teachers and the coaches and the music directors and band leaders and librarians, those people who were there for you along the years, who saw a young person who needed someone who needed a little bit of extra care or an extra word or a new book or a new song or a new challenge to kind of give them that boost that they might need. And it is such a gift for young people to have a person besides a parent to be that mentor, to help build up confidence and feel seen and loved and gain so much growth from that gift of time and love that can be given. And to me, it's the feeling of being that face of God to a young person that helps to fill them up and make them feel worthy. And so with that, we honor the mothers and others who found ways to offer nurturing and attention, even if it wasn't their official title, that helps to build us up. And the next is an image of different kinds of families. And to me, some of the most moving stories about motherhood are the ones that have a lot to do with choice and how people find their ways to a different kind of mother or a different kind of child. If they didn't have one of their own to claim, or they didn't have a parent that could love them in the way they needed. So near to us, we know a family that had, years ago, a dad and a baby son on their own, and they were living with support of people in their community and figuring out the single parenting journey, just the two of them. And this dad met a woman who caught his attention, and they ultimately married, and she adopted that boy, and they together created a new family. And this is not something that just anyone can take on, because you're getting over the hurdle of expectations and experiences and giving up the notion of carrying the child yourself and considering what others might react to that unconventional arrangement. But the main win is that these people who get a new chosen parent get so much extra love and attention that they hadn't been offered before. And that's a true kind of gift. And so we honor the others who became mothers in different ways, who sacrificed the traditional expectations to take on new responsibilities, but also new possibilities. And the next picture is supposed to depict community, but also disciples, so it's a both situation. It's been a tough and complicated year for many of us with COVID, and plenty of research is showing us that the task of mothers has become even tougher than most this year, with many with fewer supports, with fewer visitors, less people to share their families with, plenty of stressful news and health concerns, and yet just as much work or more, coupled with kids who were schooling at home or without daycare for months on end. And it can make this kind of holiday even more poignant and difficult to get through. But I have some words that I found this week that are a bit of something to shore us up, and it's from Anne Lamott, who's a really interesting author and unconventional thinker. She loves the Jesus story, but the way she writes is often irreverent, but it always catches my attention. And what she says is, this poem is for you who might feel a kind of a sheet metal loneliness on Sunday, some who may have had an awful mother, or one who recently died, or those who wanted to be a mother and didn't get to have kids the way you thought, or had kids who ended up breaking your hearts. And I would add, if you're in the trenches of caring for kids that grew inside of you, or those that grew inside your heart, we can honor and remember that this holiday is what it originally was, a call for peace and love, for a community of faith that wanted to protect the least of us, our children. And so on this Mother's Day and in this Mother's Day time, I invite us to practice the kind of loving care that Spirit would have us do. Something like find a simple activity, a walk or a video chat or prayer time with someone that we care about. Maybe it's self-care by turning off the media, turning off social media and TV and radio to remove those constant bad news stories and reminders of a cheery holiday that are just not going to work for you today. And perhaps most importantly, take the time to do something nice to brighten someone else's day. Your mother or your other or whoever it was that was helping in raising you. Write that letter, share that photo, make a call and a thank you to honor the mothering forces in your life, or show that example forward to someone else that might need it today. So in closing, if we know what love is, it's because someone else showed us how to love. And I believe that love follows a long line of love from mystery itself through the stories of Jesus and his disciples who were listening on that day, of the foot washing and the eating together, and the reminder that love is what will see us through. So from those disciples and through the many mothers and others who've loved us, they've all loved us together into being. May it be so.